The 3D Marios have been known for their non-linear platforming qualities, but have never exhibited anything as ambitious as an open world. Rather than tasking Mario to obtain important collectibles in one open-ended environment, the games traditionally divide his journey, hosting several large-scale, but self-contained sandboxes. Hub worlds featured gated entrances to these worlds, which in themselves had title cards and mission selection screens that preceded your arrival. The earlier titles would boot you out of a world after obtaining a collectible and task you to re-enter it or go to another entrance to further your journey. Even in the last major release, 2017's Super Mario Odyssey, which hosted larger environments and dropped this boot-out system, things still remained pretty segmented in that traditional collect-a-thon way. The game had multiple kingdoms you had to individually travel to from a selection screen. Its premise couldn't really facilitate a grounded open-world experience. It was a globe-trotting trip across stark aesthetics and cultures. While there were clever crossovers and secret shortcuts between kingdoms, Odyssey never proposes the possibility of wandering from a frozen desert to a realistic city in real time. You're exploring static playgrounds that generally get their major environmental changes through mission clearing, collecting important moons that give you access to further areas that ultimately lead to your collection of a kingdom's triple moon, which grants the finalized version of that kingdom. Keep in mind, these aren't necessarily complaints towards these games as much as they are observations in what they were trying to be. A game like Odyssey maximizes habits that have been synonymous with the series since 64. But newer aspects like its grander scope, moon quantities, and streamlining of collecting said moons made me wonder what the series would be like if it adopted an open-world design, and gained a sort of Breath of the Wild kind of revelation to its gameplay. And this year's 3D Mario title, Bowser's Fury, surprisingly proposes just that. The game effortlessly expresses it through its opening moments. The player can guide Mario deeper into an island until he sees out in the distance in live gameplay a gargantuan Bowser with real-time attacks and environmental debris that affect the field of play. And after obtaining a collectible to diminish his fury, Mario's granted access to a portion of Lake Lapcat, an expansive set of islands where he must collect its cat shines to both restore Bowser back to his original form and presently control his rampaging tendencies. At different intervals, the Koopa Kaiju can awaken and drastically change the experience, creating new platforming segments through his fury spikes and targeting Mario wherever he may be with large fire bursts. You don't just encounter Fury Bowser in traditional boss arenas and cutscenes, you're continually pressured with the chance that he can arrive at any point in gameplay. An open-world Mario experience with seamless area traversal and in-game events that shake up how you go about active exploration. The islands of Lake Lapcat may host your classic Stark Mario themes, grassy levels, snow levels, penultimate mountainous lava levels, but apart from one or two bonus rooms that do teleport you to a different area, Bowser's Fury is exceptional in allowing all its worlds to exist on the same map, out in the distance and reachable by any means. And once you arrive at the third act of the game and unlock every potential island to explore, it's mesmerizing to see them all on one plane, paired with missions that involve reaching across each of these distinct areas without any level selects or loading screens to speak of. Any potential cutscene can be readily skippable by a button. Even when entering the gate of a unique island, the game's debriefing of its name and objectives are smooth and unobtrusive. Bowser's Fury diminishes past segmentation strategies to properly deliver a grounded and fluid Mario journey. Its unique theming of islands, separated by a lake, is also a clever way of contextualizing its new open-world status, having distinct monuments distanced across wide stretches of water that are still accessible for traversal. That said, I think an aspect that may leave some people underwhelmed when undergoing this new open-world Mario game is that it can't be capitalized in exploration with the same level of intricate control as previous entries. Being a pack-in title with the Switch port of Super Mario 3D World, Bowser's Fury opts for its simple run-and-jump control scheme over the immense acrobatics of Mario's avatar in something like Odyssey. The reduced movement techniques of 3D World are admittedly much more noticeable when forced into an open-ended context. But even though I would have liked to see how an open-world environment could handle a versatile Mario, I don't find 3D World's engine and controls to be entirely unfitting or detrimental to the experience on offer here. 3D World, after all, still offered a reliable and compelling Mario control scheme and approach to levels, its most unique traits being derived from what made the 2D entries fun: run and jump momentum mechanics, power-ups as base enhancements, and intuitive obstacle interactions. Building up enough of a running pace in 3D World transitions your character into a sprinting state that can apply for longer jumps. The run button in general allowed for a geared manipulation of your character, making it intuitive to go from walking to running and short jumps to wider jumps as the option rests on your thumb. The more acrobatic 3D entries promoted fine analog control and wicked button combos to support Mario's parkour through an area, never lacking an option to get through a tight spot. 3D World retained some of those instantaneous techniques, albeit in nerfed varieties, because it ultimately tasked the player to confidently build up and perform dedicated jumps to get them to where they need to go. Perfect for linear obstacle courses, and while a bit more overt in Bowser's Fury, that exact science still applies. Even without things like a triple jump or a strong backflip or long jump, core running and jumping mechanics and the speed and length principles that come with them still provide some masterful traversal strats for Mario here, arguably more speed and perfection based with how much more constrained the control layout is. I do think having a fully flexible Mario is always a good proposition, but I also like the idea of controlling a minimal Mario in an immense open world, scraping by with the simple but confident jumping mechanics he's been gifted with since his 2D days. Power-ups in 3D World supported your already reliable avatar with armor and offensive maneuvers, and their enhancements have even more utility in Bowser's Fury. The Cap power-up is immensely useful for traversing these taller and denser islands, and the Tanuki suit makes horizontal displacements across the world super enticing. It's great that rather than facilitating power-ups as one-time gimmicks made for specific missions, Bowser's Fury lets you fully traverse the world and deal with enemies through whatever power-up you please. You can even stockpile power-ups so that if you ever feel like using a specific ability that Mario currently doesn't have, you can readily provide it to him. You can argue that the difficulty might be imbalanced by having free access to these abilities, and generally there being no risk of dying because of stockpiling power-ups. It did stick out to me how gratuitous the game was in providing extra power-ups, finding them in blocks, random objects, and using your companion Bowser Jr. to scavenge power-ups from painted question mark spots, which are pretty much everywhere. You'll never reach a point where health and survival are your main concerns, but unlike the mission-based adventures of the past where spotless runs towards a collectible per world are necessary to beat the game, this game has a relatively shorter quota of collectibles where you're always on the same map, which, in the same vein as Odyssey's motivation to collect as many moons as you can within a kingdom, creates this marathon-type pace to the adventure, where being prominent in this world is more important than staying alive or making perfectionist runs. This is further reflected in how the game reworks extra lives. When collecting 100 coins, instead of being granted insurance for survival, you're granted a random power-up, and dying provides enough of a punishment by deducting coins and booting you back to the last checkpoint you reached. Losing expendable lives and getting game overs in past entries punish players with severe backtracking, looming over them the threat that their course towards an objective could regress to an obnoxious degree if they weren't careful enough. But since regressing to any point in an open world isn't too particularly demeaning, Bowser's Fury takes a more gratifying approach by rewarding consistent gameplay with chances to keep that streak going. A more appropriate choice to promote activity and not the fear of failure. Whether the diminishing of lives and overall difficulty is a setback or not will depend on what you come into this game for. Personally, my time spent with the game was in testing my own pace to get as much as I could, so the priority on rewards over risk fit my playstyle nicely. The reduced acrobatics and greater focus on confident jumps and personable power-ups are much easier to take in with how Bowser's Fury designs its islands as obstacle courses that happen to have a sandbox element to them. These sandbox Mario games offered experimental layouts, dense areas built more around how Mario can freely move across a world's geometry, and less on encountering a pre-planned set of obstacles. And actual obstacle course level designs were often designated to bonus rooms, never really integrated into the immersive main worlds. Conversely, 3D World's strength was in making players encounter and grapple with stage gimmicks in a linear learning curve, kind of like getting the hang of a new toy or playset. And Bowser's Fury finds a neat middle ground by crafting the islands of Lake Lapcat as linear contraptions, but with the freedom to come at them and overcome their intended course in any potential direction. An island dedicated to successive jump pads, an island that resembles a grill with switch pads that are activated by a jump, a series of floating towers where you climb its windmill blades one by one to reach the top, a skyscraper made of clear pipe mazes, traversing the lava level through standing on directional pads. All of them exposed in a world with multiple layers, free camera movement, and exploration. The 3D branded titles were already amusing in literally implementing 2D layouts, obstacles, and philosophies into materialized 3D environments. But Bowser's Fury just pushes it to the next level. I can't begin to describe how giddy I felt when seeing these worlds resurface from the waters below, only to appear as islands that are shaped like silly linear video game levels, and that you could swim to these titanic obstacle courses out in the distance and gaze at them from the skies above as one fully realized world. They even have detailed terrain and terraforms when reaching them up close. It's like video game islands are in real life. And when you get to the kaiju battles against Fury Bowser and the islands just appear as shrunken down dioramas you can just stand on and do battle around, I can't help but find that adorable. Who needs video games to mimic reality when reality can just look like a goddamn video game, you know what I mean? It's a dream come true. Yahoo! Placing a Mario built for course clearing into an open world context makes for these amusing approaches to designing and traversing levels. But the most important aspect of Bowser's Fury that really characterizes its open world appeal to me is the monster himself. A lot of the fun you'll have with Fury Bowser is in manipulating and coping with his destructive tendencies. Every island has a cat shine hidden away within a section guarded by blocks that only Fury Bowser's blasts can destroy. But collecting any cat shine during Fury Bowser's arrival will force him to leave and revert the environment back to normal. And while you may typically want that to happen to provide smooth sailing, you'll eventually hit areas where you would like Fury Bowser to clear them out, or make his Fury spikes create obstacles for you to reach certain shines. Something that you can do once he awakens is lead him to every potential block section while you can without collecting their cat shine. After all, these blocks don't materialize once Fury Bowser leaves. It's a permanent effect on the world. So it feels much more optimal to collect them at day once you've done everything you can while his arrival lasts. Fully maximize his real-time usefulness and not miss a chance or wait until his next awakening to clear out intended obstacles. Or maybe you would like to collect them so that Fury Bowser gets out of your face. Once you figure out how cat shines interfere with Fury Bowser, you really start to consider how to make an optimal run with his inclusion in mind. You might be in a rush at every night period to lure him into specialized areas, or you could be interrupted mid-completion of a typical obstacle course and have no choice but to get it done since the shine is nearby, so you won't have to save it for another day. Even at day, and with the warning of rain signaling his arrival, you've got to estimate if you have enough time and distance to get any obtainable cat shine before his arrival, so you don't miss your chance on taking full advantage of him and make him prematurely leave. Essentially, you're not just on a freeform quest to collect important shines at your own pace, but you're also doing it with timely consideration for an event that imposes both convenience and inconvenience to your progress. This may sound obtrusive to those who just want the freedom of a Mario collect-a-thon without any other external responsibility, but I think if you're going to make Mario open world, besides just the convenience of having him in one solitary area, you should demonstrate that the environment he's in is active and affecting in all corners. There hasn't been this level of tension or time management in 3D Marios of the past, and it's all thanks to being bound to this creature. Very refreshing to experience in this game. Bowser's Fury demonstrates how Mario gameplay can greatly benefit from seamless traversal and wide-scale simulated moments, but also hosts a couple of drawbacks that arrive from making such an ambitious turn. The game's lack of segmentation or disruptions across the journey feels really invigorating, but the islands in their deliberate design as linear obstacle courses creates this weird gating of collectibles that you'll have to adjust with. On your first arrival to an island, you're guaranteed to find one of its main cat shines by its end, along with a cat shine that you can obtain by collecting 5 shards along the way, which are always present on the first go. The shines guarded by Fury blocks are also technically always present, whether you arrive at the island for the first time or just pass by them without properly entering their gate. So there are 3 shines that you can get in one visit, but once you collect these primary shines out of 5, you'll wonder how you go about getting the rest of them. And it turns out that new shines only appear once you leave an island and come back to it, in which the layout changes or a new obstacle appears by its entrance. Every island has 2 cat shines that are prone to this gating process, but the game never really makes an island's reinvention for a new viable cat shine apparent. In fact, it seems to happen off camera. You're just supposed to leave and come back to it, only to notice that it leads you to a different cat shine that you didn't know existed prior. Granted, this isn't something that you can't compromise with. My strategy for playing the game ended up being hopping from island to island to collect 2 to 3 cat shines apiece. I guess that's what they intended players to do. But I can see how this might confuse players who expect to be able to fully complete an island's cat shine quota in one visit. Perhaps a brief cutscene or live in-game moment displaying some sort of change in the island would help in making progression clearer and more efficient. But now we get to the bigger problem I have with Bowser's Fury, and it's relative to the premise it's trying to sell: the monster himself. I've praised how Fury Bowser really does open up new behaviors of going about a traditional Mario collect-a-thon. He's an extremely spontaneous and tantalizing piece of your collecting agenda. But that also makes him an extremely predictable antagonist. Random slow fireballs, fury spikes that land in telegraphed locations, and blasts that, as long as you're on the move, are easy to dodge and trick into guiding to specific areas. There were a handful of moments where Fury Bowser really caught me in a tight spot, but there were plenty more where I had to stubbornly wait on him to get him to do what I wanted to do. Even the kaiju battles, while always a nice formal treat, have him repeating the same tactics and ridiculously leaving himself open to attack. Collecting cat shines to weaken his health bar during Fury segments and seizing Giga shrines to fully wear him down seem like great options to fight off the foe as you reach landmarks in your collection. But it ultimately doesn't have as much of an impact because no matter what version of Fury Bowser you're facing, he's a total pushover of an opponent. I think it says a lot about my in-game relationship with him that even with his body at close quarters range and with the risk of dying, I had no qualms about taking photo mode selfies and brainstorming YouTube thumbnail shots with him around. But I do want to emphasize that coping with his dynamic schedule is an engaging aspect of his character in-game. In fact, close to the end of the any percent and completion runs, Fury Bowser starts appearing more often, and collecting shines no longer makes him go away. A neat switch up to his behavior that I wish happened more often beforehand. I'm more so disappointed with his intrinsic effects. I think making him pull off more than those typical attacks and making his behavior pick up the pace more often would have added more unforeseeable but compelling challenges. Maybe make him physically jab at the islands to make them shake, or do that spinny shell technique in the kaiju battles against regular Mario. Maybe even give enemies an added fury element to them like the cat NPCs go through. I just think it's worth addressing that Bowser's actual fury mostly ends up feeling like a bonus event, where with any level of competency you can always rehearse and capitalize on the same strategies, rather than a threat that has you always at the tip of your toes about staying alive and questioning the stability of your open world game, more of a tool than an actual tyrant. Having a fast travel option after beating the game is a nice reward that helps for the typical cleanup towards 100% completion. It's also pretty sweet that it's, in the base game. But having it available during Fury Bowser segments does feel a bit broken. You can literally plop yourself into areas near Giga shrines and these bonus Catshine islands and completely divert away from any close encounter with Fury Bowser. Perhaps limiting fast travel to regular daytime and prohibiting its usage during Fury Night would have helped nerf that convenience for the better. Overall, it's these dependable tropes that make this a pretty short game to both finish with 50 Catshines and complete 100 Catshines in just a couple of hours. But while Fury Bowser may not be the difficulty or thematic mood whiplash that you'd probably expect from seeing that menacing cover art, I think platforming around with this lumbering titan that unexpectedly helps you along the way does kind of feel like the point. And pretty in line with how Bowser has been treated as a progressive villain in the Mario games up to now. By Odyssey, it felt pretty clear that he should be taken less as the ultimate rival for Mario, who will escalate in power and expand in scope to his schemes at every turn, and more as the nosy neighbor that causes trouble for everyone where Mario just has to put him in his place. And what better new development can come from that dynamic than by having him still be bossed around and played for a fool in this overblown cat and mouse game, even at his most monstrous and unhinged form. On that note, I can say that this is a very fulfilling little game to replay, which I've done on several occasions now. It's entertaining to casually speedrun, with aspects like the freedom of collecting and making the most out of Fury Bowser's arrival being very potent contributors to the high of getting things done real quick. It's both the wide traversal across platforming levels and the prospect of emergent in-game events that made me quite enjoy Bowser's Fury, and hopeful for what kind of Mario experiences we can get from this point on. I don't necessarily believe that any ongoing series is better on principle of adopting open world traits, but I do believe that having a seamless and tension-filled Mario collect-a-thon is a refreshing take that alleviates a lot of its more tedious constraints of the past. So I really hope that this isn't Mario's one-night stand with open-world experimentation as much as it is a sign of things to come. Because surprisingly, for what was supposed to be a side game demo to enhance a port of a game from several years ago, this to me felt like Mario reaching that Breath of the Wild revelation, and that the fury of Bowser is not just limited to a scripted segment at the end of a stage.